There's a moment from this past July that says more about the relationship between Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia than almost anything either of them has said publicly. Sofia was in Zaragoza, making her institutional debut as honorary president of the Fundación Ibercaja, delivering her first solo remarks in front of an audience that wasn't there to see her sister. It wasn't supposed to be a joint appearance. Reporting on the day was specific that Leonor's presence hadn't been planned, that this was meant to be Sofia's third engagement without her. Leonor came anyway, and in the moments before Sofia began speaking, coverage of the event described her looking for her sister's eyes across the room, the kind of small, wordless check-in that happens between people who've spent their whole lives reading each other. That's not a detail a press office writes into a script. It's the kind of thing that only gets reported because someone in the room actually watched it happen. And it's a good starting point for understanding why, among everyone surrounding Leonor right now, family, tutors, military instructors, institutional advisors, it's her younger sister who occupies a genuinely singular place in her life. To be precise about what that place is and isn't, because precision matters here. Leonor is, by design, surrounded by an unusually large support structure. Her military formation over the past 3 years put her under the direct supervision of instructors across the Army, Navy, and Air Force, officers whose job was explicitly to prepare her, in the palace's own words, for the service and dedication capacities and representation duties she'll eventually assume as head of state. Reporting from earlier this year described additional specialized preparation underway at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, alongside extracurricular language study in Arabic and Chinese, part of a broader recalibration of her education as her military training wound down. Her parents, Felipe and Letizia, remain the most obvious and constant influence on her development, having shaped her education and her sense of duty since childhood. None of that disappears or gets diminished by anything involving Sofia. Leonor has more institutional guidance surrounding her than almost anyone her age in the country. What Sofia offers isn't guidance in that sense at all, and that's precisely the point. Every other person in Leonor's orbit relates to her, at least in part, through the lens of what she's becoming, the future head of state, the person whose judgment and bearing are being actively shaped for a role none of them will ever hold. Sofia is the one person who has watched Leonor become that from the exact same starting point, the same household, the same parents, many of the same formative moments, without herself being the one destined for the throne. That's a genuinely different kind of relationship than mentor and mentee, or parent and child, or officer and cadet. It's peer-level closeness built on shared history, which is a much rarer thing in Leonor's life than any of the other relationships surrounding her. The clearest evidence of how deliberately the two of them protect that closeness is the arrangement that came to light in September of last year, when journalist Alberto Guzman described it on the Spanish program De Corazon as, in his words, the sisters' pact. As their lives diverged more sharply than ever, Sofia beginning international university studies across Lisbon, Paris, and Berlin, Leonor finishing military training in Spain, the two reportedly committed to talking every day their schedules allowed, and set 2 fixed points each year, the Princess of Asturias Awards and the Christmas holidays, where they'd make sure to physically reunite no matter what else was happening. That's not the kind of thing you formalize with someone whose closeness you take for granted. It's the kind of thing you formalize with someone you're actively worried about losing touch with, precisely because you know how easy it would be to let that happen given the different directions their lives are pulling. There's also a quieter signal worth naming, which is how often Sofia shows up specifically at moments when Leonor is under pressure or facing something new, rather than simply at scheduled joint appearances. The Zaragoza appearance ran in the opposite direction, Leonor showing up unplanned for Sofia, but the broader pattern across coverage of the two of them describes something more like backup than ceremony, each one appearing when the other needs a familiar face nearby rather than only when protocol calls for a joint outing. That distinction matters. Royal siblings show up together constantly for official reasons, ribbon cuttings, awards ceremonies, state visits. What's less common, and what's specifically been noted in coverage of Leonor and Sofia, is showing up for each other when there's no institutional reason to. It's worth situating this against the wider pattern of royal sibling relationships, because it clarifies what's actually unusual here. Coverage of the Spanish royal family has explicitly noted that, unlike other historical periods or other current monarchies where distance or rivalry between an heir and their younger sibling has been common, Leonor and Sofia have consistently displayed a closeness that goes well beyond what protocol requires. That's not a small thing. The position Sofia occupies, permanently second in line, watching her older sister be groomed for a role she herself will never hold, is exactly the kind of dynamic that's historically bred resentment in other families in similar positions. The fact that it hasn't, based on everything documented so far, says as much about the choices both of them are making as it does about their upbringing. None of this means Sofia is advising Leonor on policy, or state affairs, or the kinds of decisions that actually require the input of trained officials and constitutional experts. That's not the role she plays, and there's no reporting suggesting otherwise. What she offers is something that's arguably harder to replace: an unscripted, unshaped, entirely uninstitutional relationship with someone who has known Leonor since before any of the titles, uniforms, or responsibilities existed. Everyone else around Leonor is, in some sense, part of preparing her to be queen. Sofia is the one person who knew her before that preparation started, and who has apparently made a deliberate, ongoing effort to make sure that part of the relationship survives everything else being built around it. Thank you for watching. If you found this useful, subscribe for more grounded, sourced coverage of the Spanish royal family, and let us know in the comments what you'd like covered next.